Today's video is called Listening Made Easy, How to Understand Native Speakers Even When They Talk Fast. I have some notes here, so sometimes I'll be looking down at my computer in case I need them. This is a presentation I've made. I would say it's a second draft, so I'm still making some changes to it, but I feel pretty confident with what I've put together so far. So I want to share it with you because I think it will be helpful. Here's what we'll do today. We're going to talk about some reasons why listening comprehension is hard in another language. There's at least 22 different reasons. So that part will potentially be a little bit overwhelming. I'm going to teach you how to instantly boost your comprehension, even though there are 22 plus reasons that comprehension can be hard. So 22 plus reasons why listening comprehension is hard. We have age. Sometimes people find younger people easier to understand. Sometimes you'll find older people easier to understand. It depends on you. For me, for example, if I'm listening to children in another language, I find that to be much harder than listening to adults. Pitch. Some people have a very low voice and their voice is down here. Some people have kind of a higher voice. Their voice is a little bit like this and it's higher up in the air. It's a higher pitch. So the pitch of your voice will impact how easy or difficult it is for you to understand someone. Some people think lower pitch is easier. Some people think that higher pitch is easier. Slang and filler words. Sometimes people use slang that you don't know. If you don't know it, it's harder for you to understand. Or maybe they use filler words, like, words like this. And if you don't know those, it's going to make it harder for you to understand. Education level, right? So if someone is very educated or not very educated, that also makes a difference. Generally, I find that language learners find it easier to understand people with a higher education level. General observation I've had. Jargon or buzzwords is another one. So I'll give you an example of this. I teach Spanish to a corporate client. And sometimes when the corporate employees are having conversations in English, I don't understand what they're saying. They're using words that they only use in that industry or maybe even in their company. I don't know. So sometimes even when they talk in English, I don't understand what they're saying. So that's jargon or buzzwords, right? They talk fast. That's obvious. Their voice texture. Some people kind of have like a raspier voice. And so maybe that makes it hard to understand. Some people they kind of talk like this. They have a breathy voice. That might make it hard. There's different types of voices. That might make it hard. Connected speech. People connect their words. That makes it harder. No context. You walk into a conversation. You don't know what they're talking about. That makes it harder. They're not articulate. They slur their words. That makes it harder. Maybe they talk really quietly and they don't have a very loud voice, so you can't hear them. That makes it harder. Background noise, unusual talker. They're talking on the phone. The phone makes it harder. There's a poor speaker quality. Maybe you're at a train station and there's a speaker making an announcement. The quality's low. Distracting body language. They look away from you. Unfamiliar vocabulary, unfamiliar grammar, unfamiliar accent. I have something called the laugh talk. I actually watched a whole bunch of videos in different languages that I speak, and I would write down every single part of the video that learners would find difficult to understand and why they would find it difficult. I notice sometimes people talk while they're laughing, and that makes it harder to understand. They don't adapt their speech to you. So this means that they don't simplify the way they talk to make it easier for you as a learner. Some people do this, some people don't. So that makes it hard too. They're not concise. They beat around the bush. They don't get to the point. That makes it harder as well. So we have 22 reasons, and there might be more, as to why it's hard to understand people. The good news is there is one golden rule that makes it easier, or rather that solves all of those 22 plus problems. Ready to hear what it is? The answer is context. The golden rule is arm yourself with context. So context, I would say there's two elements to context. Number one is, do you know what the topic is? If you go to listen to something and you know what the topic is before you listen, you will instantly find it easier to understand what they're talking about. The second piece is, how familiar are you with that topic? For example, if you try to listen to a conversation about weekend plans, and they're talking about hiking, but you don't know very many hiking words, and you don't know that vocabulary very, very well, even though you know the topic, it'll still be hard to understand because you don't know hiking words. And they're using hiking words. So it's, do you know the topic of conversation? Do you know what it is? And then how familiar are you with that topic of conversation? Most of the time, you can prepare in advance when you're going to listen to something or listen to someone. You can prepare. You can get lots of context before you listen. You can usually know what people are going to talk about before you enter a situation. So this means you can study little bit or a lot before you go into a specific situation. Again, if you know the topic. So for example, you can memorize any key words or phrases that are related to that topic. If you're going to listen to a song, well, that's really easy. Pull up the lyrics, look at them, read them, translate them, look up any unfamiliar words in a dictionary or translator, then listen to the song. It makes it much easier. You can usually arm yourself with context before you go into a situation where you're listening to people talk in a language that you're learning. More context equals more comprehension. Simple as that. More context, more comprehension. Less context, less comprehension. Without context, you won't understand. And that's more especially the case when the closer you are to being a beginner, the more that statement is true. In other words, without context, you won't understand. The closer you are to a beginner level, the more that statement is true. The closer you are to an advanced level, there's still truth to the statement, but maybe it's not 100% true. Because at an advanced level, maybe you have more tools to ask a native speaker, what does that word mean? Or what did you say? Can you say that again? I don't understand this part. You have more tools to do that. You have more knowledge to do that. But again, maybe that just means you have more context. I don't know. Now, the cool thing is context stays in your brain for a long time, maybe even forever. So what does this mean? I'll demonstrate this with a story. I've been to Germany twice in my life. Actually, maybe 3 times. Two times, I think. 2 or 3 times. And I don't speak German. When I go to other countries, I like to speak the language of the country, but I don't speak German. So I tried to learn some basics before going on my trip, and also while I was in Germany. I remember the last time I went, the most recent time, I remember that I wanted to order some food and drink. There's like a fast food sort of bakery, I guess, and I wanted to order something. Before going up to order, I wanted to make sure that I had context to understand what the person said. So I sat down, pulled out my phone, and I tried to study before ordering my food and drink. I practiced, okay, what will I say? What will they maybe say to me? What are the numbers? So can I say the price? Will I understand the prices? Excuse me, right? What if the cashier says something that I'm not prepared for? What will I do? Do I know how to say, for example, do you speak English? I tried to prepare as much as I can to get as much context about the situation of ordering food as I could before ordering my food and drink. Because if I have more context, I know the comprehension will be easier, and also speaking is easier too, especially since I was an absolute really low beginner. So someone might say, well, Azren, that's a lot of work. That's a lot of work for ordering a coffee or ordering some pastry. And it is. But the cool thing is that context stays with you. And so the next time you have to do it, even if it's many years later, if you did a good job of getting the context once, when you go to do it again, you'll get all the context faster. I don't really remember how to order a coffee in German. I can maybe remember some of the phrases, some of the numbers, but not most of what I studied that one time. But if I did it again, I'd remember much faster. The other cool thing with context is that it has a halo effect. If you get context about one situation, that will help you in other social situations too. For example, if I learned how to order a coffee in German, and let's say I learn my numbers because I know that I need to understand the price. So maybe I learn my numbers from 1 to 10 in German, and I know how to say 1 euro, 2 euros, 3 euros, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Well, the next time, if I go to learn something else in German and I have to know numbers for the something else that I learn, well, the cool thing is I learned them already when I learned to order a coffee. So that context will carry over. Some of the context will help me in another situation. So context has a halo effect overall. Okay, and so let's wrap that up here. As a conclusion, there are lots of reasons why listening comprehension is hard. I listed out many of them, but there's one thing you can do that instantly makes it easier to understand what someone says, and that is to get context. Okay. The final note I'll share with you here is, what do you do in situations where you cannot actually prepare? So you walk into a situation and you couldn't prepare to get context, right? So what are some ways to get context on the fly? It's better if you can prepare, but sometimes it's not possible. There's about three different things you can do. Number one, understand that if you just keep listening to someone talk, you'll have an easier time understanding them as time goes by. I'll give you a real life example of this. Last last week, I was listening to a live concert on YouTube in Spanish, and I didn't really understand what the singer was saying. Like literally for the first 3 minutes, the singer's singing and doing her thing, and I was like, is this Spanish? Like, what is happening? And I speak Spanish very fluently. I was very confused. I thought, what the heck is happening? What's going on here? But almost instantly, after the first 3 minutes, my ears got tuned, and I realized, oh, I understand how this person talks. I think I've identified her accent. I see why it was hard to understand before. I can now prepare for that. And then instantly, as of the second song, my comprehension boosted right up to 90%, 95, 100%, to a very, very high percentage. So you can tune your ears just by listening a little bit longer. Don't expect yourself to understand right in the beginning. Don't get discouraged when someone starts talking and you don't understand. That's normal. That will happen. But if you just wait a little bit, your ears will start to tune over time. Especially, again, the more advanced you are, the faster your ears will tune. The more beginner you are, the longer it takes for your ears to tune. If you can, listen multiple times, right? So listen multiple times to the same piece of content or to the same person. Again, sometimes that's not possible. But you can always ask someone to repeat themselves. You say, can you say that again? I didn't understand that. You can probably get someone to repeat themselves at least one time for sure, just by saying, can you repeat that? But maybe even 2 or 3 times. For example, in Spanish, I have a formula that I follow. Actually, in every language really, but Spanish is a great example. When I was learning, someone would say something. Always, my automatic response when I was a lower level, I knew I wouldn't understand. So always when someone said something, my response was, ¿Cómo? ¿Cómo meant like, pardon or excuse me? Just so they would say it again. Because I knew the first time I had no context. I didn't know what they're saying. I probably wouldn't understand. So I trained myself, always say ¿Cómo? When someone first started to talk to me. Especially if it was a stranger that I didn't know. It was just something I would often do just to get them to repeat themselves. Then level 2 was I might say, ooh, you spoke a little bit fast. I didn't understand that, right? So then they might say it again. That gets me a second, actually 1, 2, that gives me a third time to listen to what they said. Then I say, oh man, sorry, can you say that one more time? Right? So you might be able to get 2, 3, 4 repetitions, even in real life. Even in real life, you can often do that. If you can listen multiple times, that will make it easier. The third thing that you can do is listen for syllables and not words. I got this from Idahosa Ness, the guy from Mimic Method. I love this. I discovered this by accident myself many years ago, but it was cool to see him say it, someone who really focuses all his attention on pronunciation, I would say. But focus on syllables, listen for syllables and not for words. So people talk in syllables, they don't talk in words. What does that mean? Well, I'm not going to get too far into it now because that would be a longer video, but just understand that people don't pronounce words, they speak in syllables, and syllables connect with each other. If you listen for words, you're listening for sounds that the native speakers won't say. Does that make sense? You're listening for things that native speakers won't say. If you listen for syllables, and then you, in your brain, if you listen for syllables, honestly, it'll just make things easier. Let's just keep it simple. Listen for words, it's harder. Listen for syllables, listening becomes easier. The last thing is, in certain situations, you know that you won't understand everything the person's saying. In fact, if you have a beginner or maybe even intermediate level, anytime you ever go into an interaction, you already know you're not going to understand everything the person says. You just don't know enough about the language. You already know this. It's like, you know this already. So you shouldn't try to understand everything that they're saying because you're not going to understand everything they're saying. They're using too many words you don't know. Instead, listen for the gist. Can you just hear the key words? I'll give you a funny example of this. There's a lady I once met here in Calgary. This is a few years back, and she was from China. She didn't speak very much English, so we spoke in Mandarin. One day she invited me to her house for dinner. I was kind of nervous because, well, I was nervous. I mean, I'm learning Mandarin, and at that time I was a lower level than I am now. So I went, and at her house I found that I wasn't understanding a lot of what she said. So what I decided to do was I would listen to her talk. It would sound like this. I'll do it in English, but it would sound like this. Blah, 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 blah. My son doesn't like math. Blah, blah, blah. Math sucks. Blah, 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 blah. He really hates math. Blah, 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 blah. Math. Blah, 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 blah. Math. I want him, blah, 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 good grades, blah, 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 math. So I'd hear a few words and phrases, and I would get, okay, he doesn't like math, something about better grades in math, he probably has low grades. And all my replies to the person would be based on what I did understand. I would ignore the things I didn't understand and only ask more questions about or make comments about the parts of her sentences that I did understand. So I understood maybe, I don't know what percentage, 50%, 60%, 40%, I don't know. Definitely not anything close to 100. I understood a percentage of what she was saying. We had a very relatively fluent conversation. We had dinner together, enjoyed our time, and I didn't understand a very significant percentage of what she said. But I was listening for the gist. I was trying to get as much as I could from what she was saying and not even trying to understand everything. There's no hope to understand everything. So that's something else you can do to get context. Listen for the gist, and that will make things easier. And the more gist you get, over time, you'll start to get more context and it becomes easier to understand the other things a person says. Hope you found that helpful. If you have any questions, you're welcome to contact me. You know where to find me, azrenthelanguagenerd.com/contact. There's a link in the episode description box for today. Have a great day. See you. Bye-bye.